In my last video, I covered Maurice Ravel's F major string quartet, written in 1903 and catapulting the young composer into public awareness. The quartet was followed by a handful of other chamber works, all one-offs. I plan to treat those works here along with parallel works by Claude Debussy, probably oscillating between them for comparative purposes. Ravel's chamber music could be divided into two style periods. The first, prior to the Great War, and the second, everything he wrote from the end of that war until his death in 1937. The first style period includes just 3 compositions, of which the string quartet is first. By this, by the way, I mean chamber music compositions. That string quartet was followed a couple of years later by the sumptuous Introduction and Allegro for harp, flute, clarinet, and string quartet, a composition to which I'll return in a few weeks. The culminating masterpiece of this first style period is the work I'm treating in this video, finished in 1914. If you want to get a good sense of how the composer's thinking about music was developing during the decade between his string quartet and piano trio, listen to them side by side. The A minor piano trio seems familiar enough in outline. Its 4 movements map onto those of the quartet quite closely. It's at that general level, however, that the resemblance between the two works more or less ends. While the quartet does pose its share of difficulties for the players and, to a small degree, the listener, the trio is monumental in both those terms, so complex and difficult of execution that it remains unplayed more often than not. Thankfully, the music world is not wanting for virtuosi who will take on its challenges, and we have 3 of them here. This recording, made in 1960, is by violinist Yehudi Menuhin, cellist Gaspar Cassadó, and pianist Louis Kentner. The first movement opens with a magical, gently questioning theme set in swaying Basque dance rhythms, 8/8 time grouped as 3+2+3. The lower neighbor figure that inaugurates that theme does so for the main themes of the other movements as well. In this, the similarity between the 1903 quartet and the 1914 trio is quite close. The transition is a long one, itself bordering on the thematic, and the second subject is an open, spacious melody of naive quality. Oddly enough, the exposition, which occupies more than half the movement, never moves off its A minor center. This must be because Ravel has other plans. The development is a short one, set in as remote a key as possible from the exposition, and although the remainder of the movement does lip service to the sonata ideal, it can hardly be said to be driven or even much shaped by that ideal. Instead, a furious accumulation of energy during that short D-sharp minor development section propels the music irresistibly through brief recollections of earlier themes, relaxing only when the last part of the second group settles into C minor for the darkest closing imaginable. The coda is breathtaking. Its C-Lydian corrective of the darkest diatonic mode available is near miraculous, and the movement dies away into reconciled C major silence. Movement 2 is a sparkling scherzo and trio set in the tonic key of the whole and organized in a most unusual way. Ravel called the movement a pantoum, which is a poetic form from the Malay Peninsula, organized in quatrains, with the second and fourth lines of the first quatrain becoming the first and third of the second and fourth of that quatrain becoming the first and third of the next, and so on. I thought it might be appropriate to provide an English language example, so here's Donald Justice's Pantoum of the Great Depression, published in 2004. Our lives avoided tragedy simply by going on, without end and with little apparent meaning. Oh, there were storms and small catastrophes. Simply by going on we managed. No need for the heroic. Oh, there were storms and small catastrophes. I don't remember all the particulars. We managed. No need for the heroic. There were the usual celebrations, the usual sorrows. I don't remember all the particulars. Across the fence, the neighbors were our chorus. There were the usual celebrations, the usual sorrows. Thank God no one said anything in verse. The neighbors were our only chorus, and if we suffered, we kept quiet about it. At no time did anyone say anything in verse. It was the ordinary pities and fears consumed us, and if we suffered, we kept quiet about it. No audience would ever know our story. It was the ordinary pities and fears consumed us. We gathered on porches. The moon rose. We were poor. What audience would ever know our story? Beyond our windows shone the actual world. We gathered on porches. The moon rose. We were poor. And time went by, drawn by slow horses. Somewhere beyond our windows shone the world. The Great Depression had entered our souls like fog, and time went by, drawn by slow horses. We did not ourselves know what the end was. The Great Depression had entered our souls like fog. We had our flaws, perhaps a few private virtues, but we did not ourselves know what the end was. People like us simply go on. We have our flaws, perhaps a few private virtues, but it is by blind chance only that we escape tragedy. And there is no plot in that. It is devoid of poetry. In Ravel's Pantoum, two contrasting ideas appear in continual alternation. I have identified them as themes A and B. The first of them is light on its feet and chattery in quality. The second, waltz-like and more serious sounding. It is the alternation between these two three-quarter time ideas that shapes the scherzo. The contrasting trio is astonishing. Here, Ravel has adopted broad-paced 4/2 time for a singing, richly harmonized, chorale-like theme, sung first by the piano, while the violin and cello continue in fast three-quarter time as though oblivious of that change in meter. For what would appear to be its long consequent paragraph, the roles are reversed. The music soon comes off its metrical rails, however, and collapses into a writhing heap before the scherzo manages to re-emerge and bring the movement home. This movement will likely leave you trying to catch your breath. What follows next is, in my view, one of the towering masterpieces of the pre-war modernist movement in music. It is a passacaille, or passacaglia, a Baroque-era variation form in which an unchanging melody is cast and recast in various guises. The passacaglia form might be profitably compared to that of the chaconne. Indeed, the two terms are sometimes used interchangeably, although technically it is an unchanging bass line that is continually recast as an underlying ground to ever-new melodic developments in the chaconne. In this channel, I've treated two movements already that meet this description, both of which ingeniously combine passacaglia and chaconne features into what some have dubbed a chacaglia. If you're interested, those movements can be found in Brahms's Fourth Symphony and Gustav Holst's First Suite for military band. In Ravel's C-sharp minor passacaglia, the music begins in the piano's sub-basement, its thundery lowest octave. The melody, which is obviously derived from the fleet-footed pantone that preceded it, traces an elaborate inverted arch with its rising limb opening out onto a restatement of the theme, now an octave higher and sung by the cello against a simple diatonic bass line in the piano. This iteration of the theme traces the original precisely, so that the third iteration, set in the violin's lowest register, begins yet an octave higher. It is from this point that the music begins a harmonic and orchestrational journey that culminates in a searing climax a little over halfway through the movement, a climax fraught with both terror and ecstasy. It's an amazing musical moment. The gradual dying away to the movement's close includes an iteration in an antique contrapuntal style, a duo for the muted violin and cello. The instruments depart the stage one iteration at a time in the reverse of the order in which they entered at the movement's beginning. It was Ravel's intention that the final movement proceed without pause, and I've honored that in this video, although there is some deus ex machina playing unwelcome tricks in this recording during the interval between the third and fourth movements. The finale is brilliant and certainly unsettled on account of its aggressively unbalanced meters, 5/4 and 7/4, divided every way you can imagine. The only real-world thing I can think of to compare this experience to is a drive I once made in my small car across the desert from Albuquerque westward in a headwind so fierce and gusty that by the time I got to the end of that, some 3.5 hours later, I felt as though I had been beaten to a pulp. This movement may leave you feeling something similar, although I must say that the second subject is just giddy with joy and excitement and fervor, and the climax during the development is wrenching, and the end is nothing short of orchestral. And shortly after finishing this thriller, Ravel was off to war. A long story with twists and turns, from which I'll spare you.
Thank you.